Schools are supposed to feel safe. Bright hallways, locked doors, teachers nearby, places built for routine, places where every bell means something, every classroom has a purpose, every light is expected to turn off at the end of the day. That is what people believe, because in daylight, schools feel ordinary. Rows of lockers, empty desks, gym floors marked with old lines, cafeterias that still carry the sound of voices long after everyone has gone home. But night changes familiar places. When the last bus leaves, when the parking lot clears, when the janitor finishes one hallway and moves to the next, something happens to certain buildings when no one is left to witness them. Sounds begin where no one is walking. Doors stand open that were locked minutes before. Intercoms wake up with no power running through them. When classroom clocks stop on the same minute again and again, and sometimes names are spoken. Tonight, these are true school nightmares people say they survived. Stories told by former students, teachers, cleaners, security staff, and people who still refuse to pass those buildings after sunset. Some were laughed at, some were never reported, some came with recordings no one could explain. And one of them begins at exactly 3:17 a.m. Stay until the end, because the final story was never officially explained, and the people connected to it still avoid answering questions to this day. Once you hear what happened, you may understand why. The first story came from a former student who said he was given after-school detention on a Thursday in late October. Nothing unusual about that part. He had missed assignments, argued with a teacher, and was told to stay behind for 1 hour after classes ended. The room assigned for detention was an older classroom near the east wing of the school, a part of the building students rarely used unless they had to. Room 14. He said most students complained when sent there because the corridor outside always felt colder than the rest of the school. Not freezing, just wrong enough for people to notice. At 4:10 p.m., he entered the room with 3 other students. At 4:18 p.m., one student was picked up early. At 4:26 p.m., another was excused to speak with administration. At 4:41 p.m., the third asked to use the restroom and never came back. By 4:45 p.m., he was alone. The teacher supervising detention sat at the front desk grading papers in silence. No music, no phone, no conversation. Just pages turning and the sound of a clock over the whiteboard. At first, everything felt normal. Then he noticed the teacher had stopped grading, not suddenly, not dramatically, just still, head lowered, pen resting in one hand, motionless. The student looked back at the clock. Its second hand was no longer moving. He checked his phone. 4:52 p.m. The wall clock still read 4:45. He remembers that detail because he kept staring at it, waiting for it to move again. It never did. Then the classroom speaker above the door gave a short burst of static. One crackle, then silence. The teacher slowly raised her head. Without looking at the student, she said, "Did you hear that?" He laughed nervously and said no. The speaker came alive again. Static. Then a voice. Low, distorted, dragging each syllable. It said his full name. He froze. The teacher stood up so fast her chair tipped backward. She walked to the door, opened it, looked into the hallway, and immediately stepped back inside. Her face had changed. She locked the classroom door. The student asked what was happening. She didn't answer. She only whispered, "Stay away from the hallway." The lights dimmed once, returned, then dimmed again. The whiteboard marker tray rattled softly. He looked toward the board. A marker had rolled onto the floor. No one was near it. The teacher backed away from the door and stared at the whiteboard like she was expecting something. The student turned too. At first, nothing. Then a black marker lifted slightly from the tray, dropped, lifted again, and began to move. Slowly, dragging across the whiteboard. Letter by letter, the room stayed silent except for the sound of ink scratching across the surface. When it finished, 5 words were written in large, uneven letters. "You stayed too long." The student ran for the door. The teacher grabbed his arm and shouted not to open it. Something struck the other side of the door. Once, then again, then harder, like someone trying to get in. He yelled for help. No response. The teacher was crying now, repeating the same sentence under her breath. It only asked once. The lights cut out completely. The room dropped into darkness. For 2 seconds, maybe 3. When power returned, the writing on the whiteboard was gone. The teacher was gone. And the classroom door was standing open. The hallway outside was empty. No footsteps, no voices, no sign of anyone. He ran to the main office. No one believed him. They said the teacher had left 20 minutes earlier after checking that he was gone. He insisted she had been in the room the entire time. They checked security cameras. According to the footage, he had been sitting alone in room 14 since 4:41 p.m., talking to no one, reacting to empty space. When staff returned with him to collect his bag, they found one thing written on the board. Very small, in the corner, 3 numbers, 317. The second story comes from a school building that had one rule almost every student knew. Do not go to the 3rd floor east wing after dark. Officially, there was nothing mysterious about it. That section of the building was older than the rest of the campus. Pipes leaked behind the walls. Ceiling panels had water damage. Several classrooms were no longer used, and one bathroom near the far staircase had been locked for years. Students were told it was closed for repairs. That explanation lasted for a while. Then people began hearing sounds from inside. At first, it was easy to dismiss. A pipe knocking, water pressure shifting, old vents carrying noise through empty halls. But students who stayed late for sports practice, choir rehearsals, or exam study sessions all described the same thing. Soft crying, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet enough to make people stop walking. The sound usually came around the same time each evening, when most of the school had already emptied and only a few lights remained on. Some said it sounded like a girl trying not to be heard. Others said it sounded like someone standing close to the door, breathing between sobs. Teachers blamed imagination. Maintenance blamed plumbing. No one wanted to unlock the room. Then another detail began spreading through the school. The sinks inside would turn on by themselves. Students passing the east wing said they could hear water running steadily behind the locked door, sometimes for several minutes, then stopping the moment someone approached. Security staff checked more than once. Every time they opened the corridor, the sound had already stopped. No overflowing water, no wet floor outside, and no visible problem. Then names began appearing. There was a narrow window set into the upper part of the bathroom door. Frosted glass. You could not clearly see inside, but under certain conditions, shapes near the surface became visible. One winter evening, 2 students walking past noticed condensation covering the inside of the glass. Written across it with a fingertip was a single first name. They wiped the outside to see better. The letters were on the inside. By the time a teacher arrived, the glass was clear again. Stories moved quickly after that. Different students claimed different names appeared. Some names belonged to current students. Some belonged to girls who had transferred years earlier. One belonged to a teacher who retired before most students there had been born. The administration warned everyone to stop spreading rumors. That only made it worse, because now the bathroom was no longer just a locked room. It was a challenge, and eventually someone accepted it. Her name was Mia. She was in her final year, known for recording prank videos and exposing anything she thought was fake. She laughed at ghost stories, challenged urban legends, and said fear only survived when people refused to test it. When friends told her about the third-floor bathroom, she said the school probably kept it locked because of mold or broken plumbing. Then she made a promise. She would go inside, record everything, and prove the story was nonsense. She chose a Friday evening because the building would be quieter. Basketball practice ended at 6:30. Staff usually left by 7. The cleaning crew focused on lower floors first. At 6:48 p.m., Mia uploaded a short clip to her private story. She was standing beside the third-floor stairwell, smiling at the camera. Behind her, the corridor lights flickered once. She said, 10 minutes and this myth is over. That was the last normal video anyone received from her. According to her friends, she had borrowed a key earlier in the week from a student whose parent worked maintenance. Whether that part was true was never confirmed. What is confirmed is this. At 6:57 p.m., a classmate on the sports team saw the bathroom door standing open. The corridor was empty. No Mia, no sound. By 7:05 p.m., messages sent to her phone were unread. At 7:14 p.m., one friend went upstairs to look for her. The bathroom door was closed again. Locked. He said the hallway felt strangely warm, despite the rest of the floor being cold. He also said he heard water running inside. Then it stopped. Staff were called. Maintenance opened the door at 7:29 p.m. No one was inside. No broken window. No second exit. No sign she had ever entered. But her phone was lying face up beside the far sink. Still recording. Battery at 12%. The video file was over 30 minutes long. The first minute showed Mia entering with flashlight on. Dust, cracked tiles, 2 sinks, 3 mirror panels above them, stalls at the back, old fluorescent tubes humming weakly overhead. She laughed. She said, "This is what everyone's scared of?" She walked stall to stall. Empty. Checked under sinks. Nothing. Tapped pipes. Nothing. Then she faced the mirrors. The camera angle shifted as she held the phone higher. Her reflection stared back normally. She grinned and waved at herself. When then the left fluorescent light cut out, one side of the room darkened. She cursed quietly and stepped closer. Steam had begun forming across the middle mirror. No source of heat was visible. The room should have been cold. Mia whispered, "Okay, that part's weird." A line appeared in the fog, then another. Someone was writing, letter by letter, not from outside the mirror, from beneath the condensation. The name that formed was hers. M.I.A. She backed away laughing nervously, said someone must be messing with her. Then the camera dropped slightly, and when it lifted again, the mirror showed Mia standing still. But the real Mia was breathing hard, moving backward. Her reflection had not moved. For several seconds, both versions of her remained visible. One retreating, one standing in place. She kept saying, "No, no, a no." Then the mirror blinked. Not Mia, the reflection. Its eyes closed once and opened again. She screamed. The phone swung wildly, striking a sink, then landing sideways on the floor. From that angle, only part of the mirror remained visible, enough to see Mia near the door, enough to see the reflection still standing near the sink. She had not moved. Mia reached for the handle. It would not open. She pulled harder. Then slowly, the reflection turned its head toward the camera and smiled. Not a wide smile, not exaggerated, just a small expression that did not belong there. The room lights shut off. The rest of the recording was darkness. For 21 minutes, only sound remained. Running water. Mia breathing somewhere in the room. Knocking from inside one of the stalls. Then a whisper layered beneath the static. Repeated over and over. Too faint to understand. Until the final 7 seconds. The whisper became clear enough for one sentence. We switched. After that, silence. Mia was never found. The school never released the recording publicly, but copies spread through students for years. And those who claimed to hear it to the end all remembered one more detail. In the final second before the file ended, a hand touched the camera lens from the other side of the screen. The third story was told by a teacher who left the profession less than a year after it happened. She did not leave because of stress. She did not leave because of salary. She did not leave because of students. She said she left because every morning at 8:05, one name was waiting for her. The school was an older secondary campus with a reputation for strict discipline, high grades, and traditions no one fully remembered the origin of. Morning assembly was punctual. Uniform checks were serious. Attendance records were taken daily and reviewed weekly. Everything was documented. That was why the first mistake seemed small. At the beginning of the term, the teacher received a printed class register for Year 11, Section B, Standard List. Student names in alphabetical order, spaces beside each name for present, absent, or late. She called names one by one. Most students answered normally. Then she reached a name near the middle of the page, Daniel Wilson. Several students lowered their eyes. One girl at the back quietly said, "Miss, skip that one." The teacher assumed Miller had transferred. She marked absent and continued. Nothing unusual happened that day. The next morning, she opened the register before class began. Daniel Wilson had already been marked present. Blue ink, a neat check mark. She frowned, assuming another teacher had borrowed the book by mistake. She crossed it out and continued. When she called the name aloud, the room went silent. No one answered. Again, a student near the window said, "Please skip that one." This time she asked why. No one spoke. The silence felt practiced, like a conversation they had all agreed not to have. After class, she checked the office records. There was no active student by that name, but there had been one. Same class, same room, 3 years earlier. According to archived notes, Daniel had died during school break after an accident away from campus. The teacher assumed someone was playing a cruel joke. She reported it. Administration told her to ignore gossip, correct the register, and continue teaching, so she did. The next day, the mark was there again. Present, this time in black ink. A different pen. No one admitted touching the book. She began keeping it in a locked drawer. Still, every morning the mark returned. Present, sometimes blue, sometimes black, sometimes pencil. Once, written in careful red letters. Students noticed her growing uneasy. Whispers spread. Some said Daniel had never accepted being absent, and some said he hated missing class. Some said the seat he used still belonged to him. The teacher finally asked where he had sat. Every head turned to the same desk. Third row, near the window. The chair was empty. She said no one was assigned there because students refused to use it. She laughed and told them that was over. The empty desk would be used from now on. No one argued. That part disturbed her more than resistance would have. At lunch, she requested CCTV footage covering the classroom before morning lessons. The vice principal agreed, mostly to prove there was a prank. They watched the previous day's recording together. 6:42 a.m., empty room. 7:03 a.m., cleaner enters, sweeps floor, leaves. 7:19 a.m., sunlight shifts across desks. 7:46 a.m., register lies closed on teacher's desk. 7:58 a.m., the chair moved when no one touched it. Not far, only an inch, a slow scrape backward, then a forward again. Both adults leaned closer to the monitor. No one was in a room, no windows open, no visible cause. At 8:01 a.m., the register opened by itself. One page lifted, then another, stopped on the attendance sheet. The pen beside it rolled slightly. The footage glitched. When image returned, the page was marked. Present. The vice principal ended playback immediately. He said the camera had malfunctioned. He also told her not to discuss it. That afternoon, she asked students directly what they knew. At first, nothing. Then one boy spoke quietly. Daniel had sat in that chair every day. Perfect attendance, even during fever, rain, transport strikes. He once said missing school felt worse than pain. The week before holiday break, he told friends, "If I'm gone, still mark me present." They thought it was a joke. No one laughed now. The teacher refused to accept any of it. The following Monday, a substitute was assigned while she attended training off campus. Young, confident, new to the school. He entered Year 11 Section B, saw one empty desk, and sat there while organizing papers. Several students immediately told him not to. He smiled and said superstition had no place in education. He remained seated. According to students, the room temperature changed within minutes. The substitute kept rubbing his arms as if cold. Then he asked why everyone was staring behind him. No one answered, because no one was looking behind him. They were looking at the chair. It had begun to move slightly beneath him, not enough to throw him, just enough to be noticed. He stood up. The chair continued moving after he stepped away. He laughed weakly, said the floor was uneven, and resumed class. By second period, he complained of hearing someone breathing near the window. By third period, he asked if another teacher was standing outside the door. No one was there. At lunch break, he left the classroom carrying the register. He never returned. Staff searched the building. Toilets, library, parking lot, staff room, roof access. Nothing. His car remained in the lot. Phone left on his desk. Wallet untouched. No sign of him leaving campus. Police were called. The case remained unresolved. The next morning, the original teacher returned pale and exhausted. She opened the register in front of the class. Silence filled the room before she spoke. 2 names had been marked present: Daniel Wilson and the substitute teacher. No one touched the book while she stared at it. Then from the 3rd row near the window, a chair pulled itself out slowly. Would you tell the class or stay quiet? The 4th story was never meant to be told publicly. It began with an accident the school tried hard to move past. Years earlier, a late route bus carrying students home during heavy rain left the main road near a wooded stretch outside town. Reports said the driver lost control, struck a barrier, and went down an embankment before emergency crews arrived. Several students survived. Some did not. A few were never found. That final detail was rarely mentioned. Parents were given statements. Memorial flowers were placed near the gate. A scholarship fund was created. The route number was retired. The bus company changed names within months, and over time people stopped talking about it. But the gate guards did not forget, because years later, on certain nights, the same bus was said to return. The first reports came from security staff working overnight shifts during exam season. At first, they sounded embarrassed telling it. Around midnight, a yellow school bus would appear outside the front gate. No engine noise, no headlights approaching, no sound of tires on gravel. One moment the road was empty, the next moment it was there, parked exactly where buses once collected students in the afternoon. Most guards assumed exhaustion. Long shifts create mistakes in memory. Quiet roads make distance hard to judge. Reflections from passing traffic can distort shapes in darkness. Then one guard decided to document it. His name was Jones. He had worked the campus for 9 years and was known for never exaggerating anything. If a lock jammed, he reported it. If a student climbed a fence, he reported it. If rainwater entered a corridor, he reported it. So when he wrote in the logbook, 0017, yellow bus at main gate, no arrival, heard people paid attention. He added another line minutes later. No driver visible. The administration reviewed cameras. Nothing useful appeared. The outer road camera glitched for 14 seconds. When image returned, the bus was already parked. No footage showed it arriving. Jones was warned not to invent stories. 2 nights later, it happened again. This time he used his phone. The video began with the empty gate. He spoke quietly into the camera, almost joking with himself. Nothing there. Then he turned toward the road. The bus was standing in front of him. He gasped hard enough to shake the recording. The yellow paint was faded and streaked darker in places, as if rain had dried across it many times. Windows were fogged from the inside. A mud clung high along the wheel arches. Most disturbing of all, the engine was off. No vibration, no sound, no heat rising from the front grille. But the bus had no driver. Jones approached slowly, stopping several meters away. The route plate above the windshield was cracked but readable. Route 6B. That road had been discontinued after the crash. He backed away immediately. The doors opened like it expected him, not with the sharp hiss of normal hydraulics. Slowly, quietly, like something pulling them apart by hand. The interior lights flickered on one by one. No one sat inside. Rows of empty seats, dark aisle, water dripping somewhere near the rear. Jones said later he wanted to run, but could not move. Curiosity held him in place longer than fear. He stepped closer and looked through the entrance. The seats were wet. Not damp from weather tracked in, wet enough to shine under the lights. He touched the nearest seat with 2 fingers. Cold water coated his hand. He smelled it. Not rain, not cleaning fluid, something metallic beneath the scent. He wiped his fingers on his uniform and moved back. Then the driver mirror turned toward him by itself. A small movement, then another, until the rectangular mirror inside the bus faced directly outward, pointing at him. He saw only darkness reflected there. No driver's seat, no steering wheel, just darkness where the front cabin should have been. He ran to the guard office and locked the door. The bus remained outside for 23 minutes. When dawn staff arrived, it was gone. No tire marks, no water, no footprints. Administration ordered silence, but rumors spread anyway, where students began daring each other to wait near the gate after midnight. Most left early. One did not. His name was Smith, final year student, known for filming everything. He wanted proof before graduation. He said if the story was real, he would become famous. If fake, he would expose the school. He climbed a maintenance shed near the gate with a camera and waited. At 12:11 a.m., he texted friends. Nothing yet. At 12:16 a.m., road empty. At 12:17 a.m., no joke, it's here. That was his last message. The recovered camera footage was never officially released, but portions were described by those who saw it. The frame shows the gate from above. Empty road, then a burst of static. When image returns, the bus is parked below. No transition, no arrival. Just there. Smith whispers repeatedly, "No, no, no." He zooms in on the windshield. Something hangs behind the glass. Not decorations, not trash. Small objects swaying from seatbacks inside. The image sharpens. Backpacks, dozens of them. Children's bags, school logos faded, name tags attached. Some still zipped, some partly open with notebooks visible. Several belonged to students listed among those never recovered after the crash. Smith begins breathing faster. The doors open. He whispers, "It knows I'm here." Then the camera jerks downward as he climbs from the shed. He moves toward the bus despite saying he shouldn't, step by step. The lens shakes violently. At the entrance, he pauses. One last thing becomes visible in the front mirror. Someone standing behind him, tall, motionless, too close. Smith turns sharply. No one is there. He looks back at the bus. The aisle lights are now fully on. And the backpacks sway gently, though nothing has touched them. He steps inside. The video fills with static. That same night, campus cameras captured a wide shot from the parking lot. It shows Smith walking toward the open doors, then entering. The doors close. The bus remains still for 5 seconds. Then every camera feed cuts at once. When image returned, the gate was empty. Smith was never found. Months later, a janitor cleaning the lost property room discovered one new item placed neatly on a shelf. A wet backpack with Smith's student ID inside. By the time the fifth story began, students at the school had already learned something dangerous. Fear does not always start with what you see. Sometimes it starts with what answers back. Locker 317 stood on the second floor west corridor, halfway between the science wing and an old stairwell that students rarely use unless the main hall was crowded. It looked like every other locker in the row. Same faded paint, same dented corners, same ventilation slits cut into the metal. Nothing about it should have drawn attention, except for one detail. No one was assigned to it. Every year, locker numbers were distributed at orientation. Students collected keys, signed forms, and moved books into their spaces on the first week of term. But 317 was always skipped. If a student asked why, staff usually said it was damaged. If they asked why it was still locked, staff changed the subject. If they asked too many times, they were told to focus on class. That only made students more interested. Rumors grew around it for years. Some said a student once got trapped inside. Some said someone had hidden there during an emergency drill and was never the same afterward. Some said the locker had been removed once and returned the next morning in the exact same place. Most stories were nonsense. Then came the knocking. It usually happened between periods, when corridors were loud enough to hide strange sounds unless you were standing close. 3 knocks. From inside the metal door. Not random rattling, not pipes. 3 clear taps. Pause. Then 3 more. Students first laughed when they heard it. Someone had to be inside. But locker 317 was too narrow for anyone larger than a small child, and the vents were covered in dust thick enough to suggest nothing had moved through them in years. A group of students tested it one afternoon. One of them knocked on the outside 3 times. They waited. 3 knocks answered from within. The hallway went silent around them. The sound was too exact. Same rhythm, same spacing. From that day on, the locker became a challenge. Knock on it if you were brave. Run before it answered. Record it if you could. Some videos circulated, but none were clear. Phones always seemed to distort near 317. Audio clipped, screens froze, files corrupted. Still, enough people heard it that the story spread beyond the school. Administration finally intervened. A vice principal announced there would be no more gathering near the West Corridor. Any student caught tampering with lockers would be suspended. That lasted 2 days, because during lunch on Wednesday, the metal door began shaking on its own. Students across the corridor heard the impact, a heavy thud from inside, then another, then rapid blows like fists hitting sheet metal. Teachers rushed over. Several students swore the locker was bending outward between strikes. The handle rattled violently. One teacher ordered everyone back. Another shouted for maintenance. By the time staff arrived with tools, the corridor was packed with frightened students pretending not to be frightened. The padlock was old but intact. Bolt cutters snapped through it in seconds. The vice principal pulled the handle. The door opened. Inside was nothing. No shelves broken, no hidden compartment, no person, no animal. See, just darkness and the stale smell of closed metal. Students laughed nervously, relieved. Then someone near the front said, "Be quiet." Everyone listened. It was empty, but something was breathing, slowly, from inside the locker. A steady inhale, a longer exhale. The sound came from the back panel, where there was only solid metal. The vice principal slammed the door shut so hard the row beside it rattled. Locker 317 was removed that evening. Workers unscrewed it from the wall, carried it out, and replaced the gap with temporary boards. By next Monday, students returned to find the full row restored, and Locker 317 standing in the same place. Fresh paint, new lock, same number. No explanation was given. After that, students stopped treating it like a joke. But curiosity does not disappear. It changes shape. Now the dare became smaller. No more opening it, just touch the handle. Just lean close enough to hear. Just knock once and walk away. Then the second part of the story began. Students who interacted with 317 started complaining about sounds at home. 3 knocks beneath the bed, usually after midnight, usually once they had nearly fallen asleep. Parents blamed pipes, neighbors, pets, settling wood, imagination. But the pattern was consistent. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Some students changed rooms. The knocking followed. Some slept with lights on. The knocking waited until lights were off. One boy shoved storage boxes under his bed to block whatever was making the sound. That night, the knocks came from inside the closet instead. Attendance began dropping. Students looked exhausted. Several refused to speak about why. One girl told a counselor she heard breathing under the mattress after the knocks ended. Another said something touched the underside of her bed frame slowly, as if counting the slats. None of it could be proven. Then a student named Kelvin uploaded audio anonymously to a local forum. No video, only sound. He claimed he had knocked on 317 earlier that week and wanted proof of what followed him home. The recording begins with silence and a faint room fan. Then fabric movement as he gets into bed. 30 seconds pass, a nervous laugh. He whispers, "Nothing." Then it comes. 3 knocks, clear, hollow, directly beneath him. He gasps and stops moving. 5 seconds later, 3 more knocks. Closer somehow, as if the space under the bed had become smaller. Kelvin whispers, "I live on the 3rd floor." The room falls silent, and then a slow scraping sound begins under the bed, moving from one side to the other. He starts crying quietly. The bed frame creaks above him. Then a voice, low and dry, barely audible through static, speaks from beneath the mattress. One sentence. "Your turn." The audio cuts instantly. Kelvin withdrew from school the next week. No one admitted hearing from him again. As for locker 317, it remained in place for years. Students passing the West Corridor noticed one final detail. Whenever someone new walked by alone, the metal door would tap softly from the inside, 3 times. The final story is the one staff members still avoid discussing. Unlike the others, this one did not begin with rumor. It began with evidence, not complete evidence, not enough to explain anything, but enough that several employees resigned within months, and one section of the building remained closed long after repairs should have reopened it. The school had recently upgraded its security system after repeated incidents on campus. New hallway cameras, motion sensors, central monitor station near the front office, night recording backed up automatically to an internal server. Management considered it overdue. They said whatever stories students had invented would end once everything could be seen clearly. For a while they were right. False alarms dropped, vandalism stopped. Unauthorized entry became easier to track. And then a storm arrived in late November. Heavy rain, wind strong enough to shake older windows, power cuts across the district, emergency lights flickering on and off throughout the campus. The only employee on site overnight was a guard named Samuel. He had covered storms before and preferred them. Fewer distractions, no students nearby, no deliveries, just checking locks, reviewing cameras, and waiting for sunrise. At 2:58 a.m., he logged a minor leak near the gym entrance. At 3:06 a.m., he noted unstable power to the east wing. At 3:12 a.m., he made coffee. At exactly 3:17 a.m., Camera 14 activated motion detection. That camera faced the east corridor, the same corridor where room 14 stood. Samuel looked up expecting loose paper blown by drafts or a light flicker confusing the system. Instead, he saw a child walking slowly down the hallway. Small figure, barefoot, head lowered, wearing what looked like an older-style school uniform no longer used by the campus. Samuel straightened immediately. There were no students in the building. All gates were locked. Rain outside was severe enough no child would be wandering the grounds unnoticed. He zoomed the image. The camera distorted each time the figure neared center frame. Still, enough was visible. The child's clothes were damp. Water dripped onto the floor with each step. No footprints remained behind. The child stopped outside room 14, raised one hand, then entered through the closed door without opening it. Samuel replayed the clip twice. Same result. He radioed the backup line. No answer. Storm interference. He grabbed a flashlight and keys, then headed for the east corridor. His body cam was later recovered, though much of the file was damaged. The surviving footage shows him walking quickly through dark halls, beams shaking across lockers and classroom windows while rain struck the building hard enough to sound like fists. He reached room 14, door locked, no sign of forced entry. He unlocked it and stepped inside. Empty room, rows of desks, board clean, no child, only one strange detail. The wall clock above the board had stopped, 3:17. Samuel muttered something under his breath and checked corners, closets beneath desks. Nothing. Then from somewhere behind him in the corridor, a child laughed once. He turned fast enough to hit the door frame with the flashlight. No one there. The body cam cuts for 9 seconds. When image returns, Samuel is back in the monitor room, breathing heavily. Rainwater drips from his jacket onto the floor. Now he rewinds camera 14. The hallway is empty. Then he notices movement on another screen. Camera 03, front office corridor, a child standing motionless behind his chair. Samuel spun around. No one was physically there. He looked back at the monitor. The child was gone. He checked camera 07. Library entrance. The same child stood closer to the lens. Head still lowered, hands at sides. Samuel began switching feeds rapidly. Gym hall, stairwell, cafeteria, main lobby. Every camera now showed the same child. Different locations, same posture. Always a little closer than before. Then every camera changed. Without command, the feeds rotated on their own, one after another. Hallway, stairwell, storage room, science lab, roof access. Each screen showing the child nearer to the camera than the last. Samuel tried shutting the system down. On the keyboard would not respond. He unplugged one monitor, it remained on. He backed toward the door. The cameras continued cycling. Closer, closer, closer. Then camera 14 returned. Room 14. The child now stood inside the classroom, facing the board. Slowly it turned toward the lens. Its face was blurred by digital noise, except for the eyes. They were looking directly into the monitor room. Samuel stumbled backward and shouted for help no one could hear. He turned to run. Another screen caught his attention. Camera 01, monitor room interior, live feed. It showed Samuel standing near the door exactly where he was, but seated in the chair facing the monitors was Samuel. One version of him was still seated. The seated figure wore the same jacket, same posture, same face, motionless. The standing Samuel moved toward the screen in disbelief. The seated version slowly lifted one hand and pointed behind him. Samuel turned. The body cam audio captures only a sharp intake of breath, then impact. The remaining footage fractures into static and fragments of light. At 3:21 a.m., all cameras lost signal simultaneously. They remained offline until morning. When staff arrived at 6:42 a.m., the front office door was unlocked. The monitors were on. Every screen displayed empty hallways. Samuel was gone. No sign of forced exit, no blood, no struggle. Only his flashlight lying in the center of the room, still on. The office chair was spinning slowly, and on the attendance clipboard beside the monitors, someone had written one word in blue ink: present. Most schools are only buildings, concrete walls, locked classrooms, hallways built to guide people from one room to another, places filled with schedules, announcements, laughter, arguments, forgotten books, and ordinary days that end when the lights go out. That is true for most of them, but some places seem to hold on to what happened inside. Moments of fear, moments of grief, moments no one wanted remembered. And over time, those moments do not always fade. They wait, sometimes in a room no one uses anymore, sometimes behind a locked door, sometimes in a name that keeps appearing where it should not, sometimes in the sound of footsteps after everyone has gone home. sometimes in a camera feed that shows something standing where nothing should be. Maybe every story tonight has an explanation. Old buildings make strange sounds. Faulty wires cause lights to fail. People panic. Memory changes details. Rumors grow larger each year. That could be true, but explanations become harder when different people describe the same room, the same number, the same time. Room 14, Locker 317, and 3:17 a.m. So if any of these stories sounded familiar, if your school had a hallway no one liked walking through, if there was a door students warned each other about, if you ever heard something after closing time and chose not to turn around, you may understand why some people never speak about it again. And if you are ever alone in a school building late at night, when the halls go quiet, when the clocks stop, when something calls your name, do not stay after 3:17 a.m. Which story was the most disturbing? Comment below. And if you want more true nightmares, subscribe before the next bell rings.